Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to Madam Chai. Today, me and my group will present about Neorealism Theory in International Relationship. Before further ado, I will introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Akimi Muhaimin bin Helmi from Class 4B, and today I will be the first presenter. So, moving to our core topic, let's start with an introduction of neorealism. Essentially, neorealism takes a scientific approach to understanding international politics. To best understand it, it helps to look at how it differs from classical realism, another theory. While classical realism tends to blame human nature things like individual greed, pride, or ego for causing the war, neorealism looks at the bigger picture. Instead focusing on individual human flaws, neorealism argues that the conflict we see is caused by the structure of the international system itself. Because there is no global governing body over sovereign countries, the system exists in a state of anarchy, and neorealism believe this anarchy is the true root cause of conflict. Okay, continue to the next slide. Building on that structure, let's break down the key concepts and main arguments that define this theory. There are four pillars that we need to look at. The first one is the world is anarchic. In simple terms, this means there is no global police force. No one is coming to save a country if things goes wrong, leaving a nation to look out for themselves. Because of this, there goes the second pillar, which is the primary survival is the goal. To survive in an anarchic world, a country must be strong just to stay alive and protect its sovereignty from any forces outside of its nation. The third one is power is relative. From a neorealism perspective, it's not just about how much absolute power you possess. It's about having more power than the other guy to ensure your safety and make sure that you can stand a chance with the other nations. And finally, this is all results in structural pressure. The international system itself creates a high-stakes environment that forces countries to compete with one another, even if they don't inherently want to, because it is life. So, these core concepts show us how a system without a central authority naturally drives a nation towards self-preservation and competition.
Hello and a very good day. My name is Muhammad Irfan Daniel bin Swahidi and I will be presenting session 3 of our presentation, which is about the founding scholar of neorealism. So now, the question is, who came up with all of this? Who is the person behind this theory? That is what I will talk about today. So let me start with Kenneth Neil Walsh. He was born in 1924 in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the United States, and he passed away in 2013. He spent most of his career as a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and also at Columbia University. Walsh is widely considered the most important person in the development of neorealism. In fact, before he came along, most realist thinkers were still using the old classical realism approach that blame human nature for why countries fight each other. Walsh thought that was not a strong enough explanation. His main argument was this: we cannot fully explain international conflict just by saying humans are naturally bad or greedy. Different people have different views of human nature. It is hard to measure, and it does not really tell us why war happened at certain times and not others. So Walsh said, instead of looking at individual, let us look at the structure of the international system, and what is the most important feature of that structure. Yes, anarchy. The fact that there is no world government above all country. No one can force a country to do anything. Every country is on its own. And because of this anarchy, all countries, no matter who their leader is, no matter if they are democratic or not, they all have to compete and protect themselves. It is not about the people, it is about the system. Watts put all of this into his most famous book, which is Theory in International Politics, that published in 1979. This book is probably the most read and cited book in the entire field of international relations. It completely changed how scholars think about world politics. In this book, Watts argued that state, meaning country, are the main actors in international politics, and their behavior is shaped by the anarchist structure of the system they are in. The structure creates pressure on all states to compete, to balance against rivals, and to prioritize their own survival. So, the other key neorealist scholar, the first one is John Mearsheimer. He is a professor at University of Chicago and is probably the most well-known neorealist afterwards. His most famous book is The Tragedy of Greek Power Politics that published in 2001. Mearsheimer developed what he called offensive realism. He agrees with Watts that anarchy forces states to compete, but he goes further, where Watts says states only need enough power to be secure. Mearsheimer says states will always to get as much power as possible. The second scholar is Robert Gilpin. His book War and Change in World Book Politics, published in 1981, look at how major power rise and fall over time. He studied what happened when the dominant power in the world start to decline and a new rising power challenges it. His work helps explain why big shifts in world politics are often accompanied by major conflict. The third one is Barry Posen. Applied neorealist thinking specifically to military strategy. He argued that the structure of the international system does not just influence whether countries go to war, it also shapes how they organize and plan their armed force. And finally, Stephen Watts developed something that called balance of threat theory. This is a refinement of Watts' balance of power idea. Watts says countries balance against the most powerful state, but Watts said countries actually balance against the most threatening state. And threat depends on more than just power. It also depends on how close the country geographically, how aggressive it appears, and whether it seems to have hostile intention. So this made neorealism more flexible and more realistic in explaining alliance behavior.
Hi, my name is Arif Amanuddin. I will explain the analysis of neorealism theory by discussing its strengths and weaknesses. First, one of strength in neorealism is that it is a simple theory because it uses only a few assumptions, but it can explain many international events and state behaviors. Because of this, the theory is easier to understand and can be applied to different situations in international relations. Besides that, neorealism focuses on the structure of the international system instead of individual leader or domestic politics. This means countries behave according to the international environment around them. Since there is no central world governments, states must protect themselves and ensure their own survival. Another strength of this theory is its strong historical relevance. Neorealism can explain major events such as the Cold War and competition among powerful countries. It explains why states continuously seek power and security in order to survive. In addition, neorealism also explains why conflict happens repeatedly through history. Countries often compete because they fear threats from other states and want to maintain their own security. The theory is also considered scientific because its idea can be tested through historical evidence and observable patterns. However, neorealism also has several weaknesses. First, it underestimates international corporations and does not give enough attention to international organizations and peaceful collaboration between countries. It is also considered to state-centered because it mainly focuses on state while ignoring the influence of NGO and other non-state actors in international relations. Furthermore, neorealism pays less attention to norms, identity, culture, and ideas that may influence state behavior. Lastly, the theory struggles to explain major developments such as European Union integration and peaceful end of the Cold War. Overall, neorealism is a useful theory for understanding power competition and security issues in international relations. It helps explain why countries compete and seek power to ensure their survival. However, the theory also has limitations because it pays less attention to cooperation, international institutions, and other factors that influence global politics. That's all from me. Thank you.
Alright, good morning everyone. Today I will explain the comparison between neorealism and liberalism in international relations. First, neorealism believes that the international system is dangerous and anarchic because there are no world government to control all countries. Because of this, countries must depend on themselves for survival. For example, countries like the United States, China, and Russia continue to strengthen their military power because they want to protect their national security. Liberalism believes that even though the world is anarchic, cooperation between countries is still possible. Countries can work together through diplomacy, trade, and also international organization. Second, neorealism focuses more on military strength and national interests. Countries will always try to become stronger than others to avoid threats. However, liberalism focuses more on economic cooperation and peaceful relationship. For example, organizations like the United Nations and ASEAN helps countries discuss problems peacefully and reduce conflict between states. Lastly, neorealism believes cooperation is limited because states mainly care about their own survival. On the other hand, liberalism believes cooperation and international institutions can build trust and create peace between countries. So that's all the comparison between neorealism and also liberalism. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Najib bin Muhammad Kamal Reza, and I'm going to continue this presentation by presenting the impacts of neorealism theory on international relations. I'm going to start off with the positive impact. One positive impact of neorealism is that it encourages a balance of power among states, which can reduce the possibility of domination by one powerful country. Neorealists believe that when power is distributed relatively equally, states will avoid direct war because no country wants to risk destruction. Neorealism helps explain how competition between powerful states can sometimes create stability instead of chaos. The second positive impact of this theory is it encourages states to strengthen national security. Neorealism has positively influenced countries to improve their military, economic, and diplomatic capabilities in order to protect national security. For example, many countries strengthened their defense system after the September 11 attacks to prevent future security threats. Neorealism helps policymakers understand the importance of national preparedness and strategic alliances. This contributes to stronger state security and defense planning in global politics. Another positive impact of neorealism is that it offers a simple and systematic framework for analyzing international relations. The theory explains why states often compete for powers, form alliances, and prioritize for survival. Scholars and policymakers use neorealism to study conflicts, security dilemmas, and global power structures. The theory remains influential because it helps explain patterns of rivalry and cooperation in the world of politics. Now moving on to the negative impact. One negative impact of neorealism is that it encourages armed races and excessive military competition between states. This often creates a security dilemma where one country's defensive actions are viewed as aggressive by others. For example, during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union spent enormous amounts of money building nuclear weapons, leading to global fear and instability. Neorealism may therefore contribute to distrust and tension rather than peaceful cooperation between nations. The second negative impact is it reduces the importance of international cooperation. Neorealism is often criticized for underestimating the role of international organizations, diplomacy, and corporations. The theory assumes that states mainly focus on self-interest and survival, making long-term cooperation difficult. This perspective can weaken support for global institutions because countries may prioritize national interests over collective goals. Critics argue that neorealism ignores how diplomacy and international law can promote peace and cooperation. Another negative impact of neorealism is that it treats states as unitary actors and pays little attention to domestic politics, culture, ideology, or individual leaders. Critics argue that international relations are not influenced by only the structure of the system but also by internal political decisions and human behavior. This limitation shows that the theory may oversimplify complex international events. So in conclusion, neorealism explains that states compete for power and security because the international system is anarchic and lacks a central authority. The theory helps explain conflicts, alliances, and global competition, but it also has weaknesses because it underestimates cooperation and ignores domestic factors. Overall, neorealism remains an important theory in understanding international relations. That is all from us. Thank you.